A bankrupt millionaire abandoned his mother, who had terminal cancer, on the side of the road to keep all of her fortune for himself. Days later, he was paralyzed when he woke up and saw 3 black cars parked at the gate of his mansion. Eleanor always woke up early. That morning was no different. By 6 in the morning, she was already up preparing coffee, opening the windows to let the fresh air into the simple house where she had lived for more than 30 years. It was a small house with 2 bedrooms, old but well-maintained furniture, walls that held decades of memories and sacrifices. She looked through the kitchen window and saw the sun rising, painting the sky in orange and pink tones. It was a beautiful, peaceful, ordinary day. There was nothing indicating that her life was about to change forever. She ran her hand over her floral apron, the same one she had worn for years, and sighed contentedly. She liked her routine, the predictability of her days, the peace she had built with so much effort. "Another day of blessings," she said quietly, as she used to do every morning. The house was too quiet. Eleanor missed the noise, the hustle and bustle, the times when Mitchell still lived there. Her only son, the boy she had raised alone after her husband abandoned them when the child was only 3 years old. They were difficult years, working 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and sewing at night to pay the bills and give her son everything he needed. It was never easy, but Eleanor never complained. She saw the sacrifice as an investment in the boy's future, and for many years believed that this investment had borne fruit. Mitchell grew up, studied, graduated in business administration, got a good job, married, prospered. Or at least that's what Eleanor thought. In recent years, her son's visits became less frequent, calls more spaced out, excuses more frequent. He's busy building his life, she thought, trying not to be hurt by the growing distance. What Eleanor didn't know was that the life Mitchell had built was crumbling. Her son, once a promising businessman, now faced imminent bankruptcy. The company he opened with such pride, investing everything he had and much of what he didn't have, was drowning in debt. Unpaid bank loans, suppliers demanding payment, employees without wages. Mitchell had bet big on a business that seemed promising, expanded too quickly, trusted the wrong people, made hasty decisions. Now he was paying the price. The luxurious mansion he had bought was about to be seized by the bank. The imported cars had already been sold. His wife had left him 6 months ago, tired of the fights about money, tired of the pressure, tired of seeing the man she loved turn into someone bitter and desperate. "You've become obsessed with money," were her last words before leaving. Mitchell was sitting in his empty office that same morning. Most of the furniture had already been taken to pay debts. All that remained was a desk, a chair, and piles of papers scattered on the floor. Bills, collection notices, legal notifications. He ran his hand over his tired face, feeling his unshaven beard scratch his palm. He hadn't slept properly in weeks, perhaps months. Every night was the same, lying on the mattress on the floor of the empty room, looking at the ceiling, calculating debts, searching for exits that didn't exist. He thought about calling his mother, asking for help, but pride was greater. How could he tell that woman who worked so hard to give him a future that he had thrown everything away? How to look her in the eyes and admit he was a failure? "She doesn't need to know, I'll solve this somehow on my own," he told himself, although deep down he knew there was no solution anymore. The relationship between mother and son had cooled in recent years, not for lack of love, but because of pride and shame. Mitchell avoided his mother because he didn't want her to see his downfall. Eleanor felt the distance but didn't understand why, blamed herself for something she didn't know she had done, wondered where she had gone wrong in raising her son. The few times they saw each other, Mitchell made up excuses, talked about important meetings that no longer existed, business trips that didn't happen, a successful life that was just a facade. Eleanor believed, or pretended to believe, because it was easier than confronting the truth she felt in her heart. She saw the tiredness in her son's eyes, the weight on his shoulders, the poorly disguised sadness, but when she asked if everything was okay, he always gave the same answer. "Everything's great, Mom, I'm just busy," he lied, and she pretended to believe it. Eleanor finished tidying the kitchen and went to the living room. She sat on the old but comfortable sofa, picked up her sewing basket and began working on an embroidery. She liked to keep her hands busy, always had. Idleness, was never part of her vocabulary. Even retired, she continued doing small sewing jobs for neighbors, not because she needed the money, but because she liked feeling useful. Her retirement was modest, but enough for her simple needs. She never went for luxuries, never wanted much beyond the basics. Food on the table, roof over her head, health to continue. The rest is superfluous, she used to say. If she had known what her son was going through, she would have given everything she had to help him. But Mitchell kept the walls too high for her to see beyond them. The clock on the wall marked noon when Eleanor decided to make lunch. She prepared a simple meal. She ate alone at the small kitchen table, as she did every day, looking out the window, watching the birds in the yard. She thought about calling Mitchell, asking if he wanted to come for lunch, but decided not to bother him. He must be busy, she thought, as she always did. After washing the dishes, she went to rest a bit. She lay down on the bed, closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. There was a strange feeling in her body, a different kind of tiredness, a weight in her chest that she attributed to anxiety. Lately, she had been feeling this frequently, but ignored it as she ignored any sign of weakness. It's just fatigue, I'll feel better after resting, she told herself, without seeking medical help. The afternoon arrived slowly. Eleanor got up, still feeling that strange weight, but determined to ignore it. She went to water the plants in the yard, sweep the porch, do the small tasks that made up her day. At 3 in the afternoon, as was her habit, she returned to the kitchen to prepare tea. She put the kettle on the stove, took her favorite cup, the one with blue flowers that she had received as a gift from Mitchell when he was still a child. She smiled, remembering the shy boy handing her the poorly wrapped package, his eyes shining with anticipation, waiting for her reaction. Where did that boy go? She thought, with a tightness in her heart. The adult Mitchell was so different from the loving child she had known, more distant, more closed off, more lost in a world she didn't completely understand. While waiting for the water to boil, Eleanor felt a twinge in her chest. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She frowned, placed her hand over the spot, massaged it lightly. Must be heartburn, she thought, although she hadn't eaten anything that could cause it. The kettle whistled. She turned off the heat, poured the hot water over the tea bag in the cup. The scent of chamomile filled the kitchen, comforting and familiar. She carried the cup to the living room, intending to sit down and watch the 3 o'clock soap opera, her daily company, her moment of relaxation. But when she was halfway between the kitchen and the living room, another twinge came. This time stronger, more insistent, making her stop midway. This isn't normal, she thought, for the first time allowing herself to recognize that something was wrong. The pain came like a lightning bolt across Eleanor's chest. She was in the kitchen preparing afternoon tea when she felt the violent squeeze that made her drop the cup on the floor. The sound of porcelain shattering echoed through the empty house, but Eleanor barely noticed. Her legs weakened, and she leaned on the table trying to breathe, trying to understand what was happening to her body. Cold sweat ran down her forehead while the room around her began to spin in increasingly faster circles. She brought her hand to her chest, pressing hard as if that could contain the sensation that something inside her was breaking apart. The phone was on the small table in the living room, just a few meters away, but it seemed like kilometers. I need to call Mitchell, she thought, feeling the strength leaving her body. Eleanor dragged herself to the living room, holding onto furniture, walls, anything she found along the way. Each step was a battle against the darkness that threatened to envelop her. Her heart beat erratically, sometimes too fast, sometimes pausing in a frightening way. Her hands trembled so much that she could barely pick up the device. She dialed her son's number with fingers that seemed not to obey her brain's commands. The ringtone sounded once, twice, 3 times. Eleanor prayed silently for him to answer, for him not to be busy, for him to hear her before it was too late. Her vision was beginning to darken at the edges, as if someone were closing curtains around her eyes. Answer, my son, please, she murmured, feeling her body giving way. Mitchell was in the office when his cell phone vibrated in his pocket. He looked at the screen and saw his mother's name flashing. He hesitated for a second, thinking about returning the call later, but something deep in his chest made him answer. "Hello, Mom," he said, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb colleagues around him. From the other end of the line, he heard only labored breathing, irregular, frightening. "Mom, is everything okay?" Mitchell asked, now with a louder voice, feeling a chill run down his spine. It was then that he heard, weak and trembling, almost a whisper, "Mitchell, son, I need you," said Eleanor, and then the line went silent. Mitchell's heart raced. He was already on his feet, grabbing his car keys before even fully processing what he had heard. "Mom, Mom, answer me," he shouted into the phone, but there was only silence on the other end. His colleagues looked startled, but Mitchell didn't care. He ran out of the office, taking the stairs two at a time, not waiting for the elevator. His brain was working at maximum speed, imagining the worst, trying to calculate how long it would take to reach her house. 30 minutes under normal conditions, maybe 20 if he drove like a madman. He got in the car and accelerated, feeling his hands sweat on the steering wheel. "Hang on, Mom, I'm coming," he said aloud, as if she could hear him. Traffic seemed to conspire against Mitchell. Each red light was an eternity, each slow car in front a torture. He honked, swerved, accelerated whenever there was a gap. His heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his own ears. Terrible thoughts invaded his mind, images of his mother fallen alone, calling for help that didn't come. He pressed the accelerator even harder, ignoring speed limits, ignoring prudence, ignoring everything except getting to her. The streets passed in a blur as Mitchell prayed, something he hadn't done in years. "Please let her be okay, just that, let her be okay," he repeated like a mantra. When he finally reached the house, Mitchell left the car poorly parked on the sidewalk and ran to the door. The key trembled in his hand as he tried to unlock it. "Mom, Mom, where are you?" he shouted as soon as he entered, but the silence of the house was deafening. He ran through the living room and saw her. Eleanor was lying on the floor beside the sofa, phone still in hand, eyes closed, her face frighteningly pale. Mitchell felt the world collapse. He knelt beside her, taking her wrist with trembling fingers. It was there, weak, irregular, but it was there. "Mom, I'm here, you're going to be fine," he said, trying to keep his voice steady even with tears burning in his eyes. Mitchell picked his mother up in his arms. She was lighter than he remembered, or perhaps adrenaline made him stronger. He carried her to the car, laying her carefully on the back seat. Eleanor moaned softly but didn't open her eyes. Mitchell ran back to lock the house, then got in the car and sped toward the nearest hospital. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other stretched back, holding his mother's cold hand. He talked to her non-stop as if his voice could keep her anchored to life. "Oh, you're not going to leave me, Mom. You're strong. You've always been strong. Just hold on a little longer," he said, swallowing the lump in his throat. The hospital appeared ahead like a beacon in the darkness. Mitchell stopped the car at the emergency entrance abruptly, almost hitting the curb. He jumped out and opened the back door, taking his mother in his arms again. She was even paler, her lips colorless, her breathing almost imperceptible. Mitchell crossed the automatic doors, shouting with all the strength in his lungs. "Help! Somebody help me! My mother is dying!" he yelled, feeling his voice tear his throat. People in the waiting room turned in alarm, and immediately 2 nurses ran toward him. The nurses acted quickly. One brought a gurney with wheels, while the other helped Mitchell lay Eleanor on it. "What happened?" asked the nurse, a tall man in a blue coat, as he began checking vital signs. "She called me. She had chest pain. When I arrived, she was like this, unconscious, barely any pulse," Mitchell explained, following alongside the gurney as they took her down the corridor. A doctor joined them, young and serious-looking, bringing a stethoscope. "We need to take her to the emergency room now," she said, and then they turned to Mitchell, blocking his path. A nurse put her hand on Mitchell's chest, preventing him from advancing. "You need to wait here. You can't enter the emergency room," she said in a firm but not harsh voice. Mitchell tried to pass. "She's my mother. I need to be with her," he protested, feeling desperation take over. The nurse held his arm more firmly. "I understand, but here you'll only get in the way. Let the doctors work. It's best for her," insisted the woman, looking him in the eyes with an expression that was both understanding and inflexible. Mitchell felt his legs weaken, but nodded. "Please save her, please," he begged, his voice breaking. He stood there in the hallway, watching the gurney with his mother disappear behind double glass doors. Other doctors and nurses ran by, entering the same room. There was urgency in every movement, in every expression, and this only increased Mitchell's terror. He leaned against the cold wall, feeling his legs fail, sliding until he was sitting on the floor. His hands trembled uncontrollably. People passed around him, but he couldn't see anyone. All he could think about was his mother, the woman who had always been there, who raised him alone, who worked double to give him everything. "She can't die, she can't," he muttered to himself. Time seemed to have stopped. Mitchell looked at the clock on the wall, but the hands seemed to move in slow motion. Each second was torture, each minute an eternity. He closed his eyes, trying to control his breathing, trying not to let panic win. But images invaded his mind without permission. His mother fallen on the floor, her face colorless, her body motionless. What if he had taken one more minute? What if he hadn't answered the phone? These questions hammered his conscience like nails being driven in. "She'll be okay, she has to be okay," he said aloud, needing to hear the words even if they came from himself. A scream from inside the emergency room made Mitchell jump. He ran to the glass doors, pressing his face against them, trying to see what was happening inside. Through the foggy glass, he saw figures moving quickly around the stretcher. Machines were flashing, doctors gesturing. There was a palpable tension in the air, even through the physical barrier. Mitchell knocked on the door. "What's happening? Someone tell me what's happening," he shouted, but no one answered. A nurse outside came to him. "Sir, please, you need to calm down and go back to the waiting room," she said, trying to guide him. Mitchell jerked away from the nurse's hand. "I'm not leaving here. That's my mother in there," he said, pointing to the doors. The nurse sighed, clearly dealing with a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "I know it's difficult, but staying here won't help her. The doctors are doing everything they can, I promise. As soon as there's news, someone will come talk to you," she explained, her voice patient but firm. Mitchell looked at the door again, then at the nurse, and finally nodded, defeated. He walked back to the corridor but didn't go to the waiting room. He stayed there, leaning against the wall, from where he could still see the doors. More doctors rushed into the room. Mitchell counted 3, 4, 5 different professionals crossing those doors. Was that good or bad? Did it mean she needed more help, or that there were more people to save her? He didn't know. He didn't understand anything about medicine, never needed to understand. His mother had always been healthy, strong, tireless, never got sick, never complained of pain. How could this happen so suddenly? One day she was fine, and the next she was fighting for her life in an emergency room. "I should have noticed, should have visited more, should have paid attention," Mitchell thought, guilt beginning to mix with fear. The sound of a monitor going off in a sharp alarm came through the doors. Mitchell felt his blood freeze in his veins. This sound he knew from movies, from series, and it never meant anything good. He pressed his face against the glass again, trying to see, trying to understand. Through the foggy window, he saw a doctor climb onto the stretcher, saw the rhythmic movements of cardiac massage, saw other doctors hastily preparing equipment. The world around Mitchell disappeared. There was no more corridor, no more hospital, nothing but that scene unfolding behind the glass. "No, no, no, no," he repeated like a desperate mantra. A doctor inside the room shouted something that Mitchell couldn't hear clearly, but read on his lips. "Crash cart," the man said. And immediately someone pushed a large piece of equipment up to the stretcher. Mitchell knew what that was. Defibrillator. They were going to shock her. Did that mean her heart had stopped? His mother's heart had stopped beating? Mitchell's legs gave way again, and he slid down the wall until he sat on the cold floor. His hands went to his head, fingers pulling his own hair. "Please, God, please, don't let her die. I'll do anything, anything. Just don't let her die," he prayed, tears finally flowing freely down his face. Through the glass, he watched the doctors trying to revive his mother, while the equipment sounded in alert and tension took over the environment. Mitchell punched the floor beside him, feeling pain explode in his fingers, but it was nothing compared to the pain in his chest. "Come back, Mum. Please, come back. Don't leave me alone here," he whispered, his voice strangled by tears. The second shock was applied. Eleanor's body arched again, and then Mitchell saw all the doctors stop looking at the monitor. Time stopped. The whole world held its breath with him. One of the doctors nodded. Another resumed cardiac massage. More medications were injected. Mitchell could no longer see clearly through his tears. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, desperate to see what was happening, to know if she was alive, if she was fighting, if she was coming back. The movement inside the room remained frantic. No one stopped. No one gave up. That had to be a good sign, right? If there was nothing more to do, they would stop. But they continued. They kept fighting for his mother's life. "Keep fighting, Mum. I know you can do it. You've always been a fighter," Mitchell said, as if she could hear him through the walls. A nurse finally left the room. Mitchell jumped up, staggering, running to her before she could leave. He grabbed her arm, perhaps with more force than he should. "How is she? Please tell me how she is," he begged, searching the woman's eyes for any sign of hope. The nurse looked at him with a tired and serious expression. "The doctors are doing everything possible. She had a cardiac arrest, but we managed to reverse it. Now they're stabilizing her to do the necessary exams," she explained, speaking quickly like someone with little time. Mitchell felt a wave of relief so strong he almost fell again. "She's alive. Will she be okay?" he asked, squeezing the nurse's arm even tighter. She gently freed herself from his grip. "She is alive, yes, but her condition is serious. We can't say yet if she'll be okay. We need to discover what caused the arrest, run tests, understand what's happening to her," the nurse responded, and before Mitchell could ask more questions, she had already gone back into the room. He stood there still, processing the information. Alive, she was alive. For now, that had to be enough, but it wasn't enough. Mitchell wanted more. He wanted guarantees, he wanted promises. He wanted someone to look him in the eyes and tell him that his mother would survive, would recover, would go back to being the strong woman she always was. But no one could give those guarantees. He knew that. Life didn't work that way. Even so, it was cruel to have to wait without knowing, without being able to do anything but stand there, useless, while others fought for the life of the person he loved most in the world. I should be in there with her, holding her hand, telling her everything is okay, he thought, even knowing that wasn't allowed. More time passed. Mitchell didn't know how much. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. The clock on the wall was useless. The numbers no longer made sense. He walked back and forth down the corridor, unable to stay still, unable to sit, unable to do anything but move. Other patients passed by, other families waited, but Mitchell saw no one. He was trapped in his own bubble of despair and fear. Occasionally he looked at the emergency room doors, trying to catch any movement, any sign. How long does it take to stabilize someone? How long until they tell me something, he thought, impatience mixing with terror. Finally, the double doors opened. A doctor came out, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tired expression that carried the weight of someone who had just fought a difficult battle. He wore the surgical gown still tied at the waist, and there were deep marks of fatigue around his eyes. Mitchell felt his legs weaken at the sight of him, but forced himself to remain standing. He ran to the doctor before he could take 2 steps, almost tripping over his own feet in the urgency to reach him. His heart was beating so hard he felt it in his temples, his throat, every part of his body. His hands were cold and sweaty as he tried to mentally prepare himself for what he was about to hear. "Doctor, how's my mother?" "Please tell me how she is," Mitchell blurted out, his voice coming out louder and more desperate than he intended, echoing down the hallway and making some people turn to look. The doctor raised a hand in a gesture asking for calm, but there was something in his eyes that made Mitchell's stomach turn. It wasn't the expression of someone bringing good news. "Let's sit down, I need to talk to you calmly," said the doctor, indicating the nearby chairs with a movement of his head. Mitchell shook his head violently, refusing to sit, refusing to waste time with formalities when all he wanted were answers. "No, please, just tell me now, is she alive? Will she be okay?" he insisted, grabbing the doctor's arm without realizing the force he was putting into the grip. The doctor looked at Mitchell's hand on his arm, then at his face, and must have seen the desperation stamped there because he just nodded slowly. "She is alive, yes, but we need to talk about her condition. Please sit with me for a moment," the doctor asked, and this time there was a gentle firmness in his voice that made Mitchell yield. They sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs in the hallway, but Mitchell barely felt where he was. His entire body was tense, leaning forward, hands pressed together so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The doctor took a deep breath before beginning, organizing his words, choosing how to convey information that was clearly difficult to give. "My name is Dr. Lowell. I'm the surgeon in charge of your mother's case. We managed to resuscitate her when she arrived. Her heart had stopped for a few minutes, but responded to emergency procedures, he began, pausing to observe Mitchell's reaction. A very brief relief passed through Mitchell's body, but it lasted only a second before the doctor continued. However, during the emergency exams we performed, we discovered something very serious, said Dr. Lowell, and Mitchell felt the world start to crumble again. Serious like what? What did you find? He asked, his voice coming out hoarse and low. Dr. Lowell interlaced his fingers, leaning slightly forward, assuming that posture doctors adopt when they need to deliver bad news. Your mother has cancer, Mitchell. Cancer at a very advanced stage, terminal. There's a large tumor in her lung that has spread to other organs, what we call generalized metastasis. It's pressing on vital structures, including the heart, which probably caused the cardiac arrest she suffered, the doctor explained, each word falling like a sledgehammer on Mitchell's chest. The world around him became blurry. Sounds became muffled as if he were underwater. Cancer, terminal, metastasis, words he knew had heard before in movies, in news reports, but never imagined hearing related to his mother. No, it can't be. She was fine. She never complained about anything. How can she have cancer? Said Mitchell, shaking his head in denial, refusing to accept that impossible reality. Dr. Lowell placed a hand on Mitchell's shoulder, a small gesture but one that carried genuine compassion. Unfortunately, it's very common, especially in older, stubborn people who ignore symptoms until it's too late. Coughing, fatigue, chest pain. She probably had been feeling these signs for months but didn't seek medical help, he explained, and Mitchell felt a wave of guilt so strong he could barely breathe. How did he not notice? When was the last time he really looked at his mother, paid attention to how she was doing? He was so absorbed in his own problems, in his bankruptcy, in his selfish concerns, that he didn't see his own mother getting sick. I should have noticed, should have insisted she get exams, should have been present, Mitchell muttered, more to himself than to the doctor, tears finally beginning to stream down his face without him being able to contain them. The doctor waited a moment, giving Mitchell time to process the information before continuing, but there was more, and from the doctor's expression, the worst was yet to come. Mitchell, I need to be honest with you because your mother will need you to be strong now. Her condition is extremely serious. Her body is very weak, not just from the cancer, but from the cardiac arrest she suffered. She has hours, maybe a day at most. We've done everything we could, but there's nothing more medicine can do at this stage, said Dr. Lowell, and these words were like shots piercing Mitchell's chest. Hours. Maybe a day. His mother had only hours to live. The woman who raised him, who worked to the bone to give him everything, who was always there, was going to die. And there would be no miracle, no last-hour salvation, no happy ending. No, please, there has to be something. Some treatment, some surgery, anything, Mitchell begged, clinging to a hope he already knew was non-existent. The doctor slowly shook his head, and there was genuine sadness in his eyes. If we had discovered it earlier, months ago, there might have been options. Chemotherapy, radiotherapy, even surgery. But now the cancer is too widespread, her body is too weak. A surgery would kill her on the table. Chemotherapy would just be suffering without results. The most humane thing we can do now is keep her comfortable, pain-free. Let her spend her final moments in peace, the doctor explained, and although Mitchell knew those words came from a place of experience and compassion, each one was like poison corroding his insides. Peace. How could there be peace knowing he was losing his mother? How could he accept that there was nothing to do except wait for the end? I want to see her. I need to see her now, said Mitchell, wiping away tears with the back of his hand, trying to regain some control over himself. Dr. Lowell nodded and stood up, indicating that Mitchell should follow him. She is in the ICU now, intubated and sedated. We transferred her there after stabilizing her vital signs. We normally don't allow visits outside visiting hours, but given the circumstances, I'll make an exception. You can stay with her for a few minutes, he said, and began walking down the hallway. Mitchell stood up on wobbly legs, following the doctor with uncertain steps. Each meter they walked felt like an eternity, and at the same time came too quickly. Part of him wanted to rush to his mother. Another part feared what he would see when he got there. They walked through doors, turned down corridors, went up a flight of stairs. Everything was white, clean, with a strong smell of disinfectant that made Mitchell's stomach churn. Is she conscious? Mitchell asked, breaking the tense silence. The doctor slowed his pace slightly before answering. "She's sedated, but not deeply. She might recognize your voice. She might be able to open her eyes for brief moments. But don't expect a conversation, Mitchell. She's very weak. Her body is fighting to maintain basic functions," the doctor explained, turning another corner until they reached double doors with a large sign reading ICU. He stopped before opening them. "Prepare yourself. Seeing someone we love in an ICU bed is never easy. She'll be surrounded by tubes, machines, monitors. It might look frightening, but each piece of equipment is there to keep her comfortable and monitor her vital signs," the doctor warned, and Mitchell nodded, although nothing could really prepare him for what he was about to see. "I just need to be with her, no matter what she looks like," Mitchell said, and his voice came out firm for the first time since arriving at the hospital. They entered the ICU, and Mitchell was immediately struck by the intensity of the environment. There were 6 beds separated by curtains, each with its own arsenal of medical equipment. Constant beeps from monitors created a strange and disturbing symphony. Nurses circulated silently between the beds, checking patients, adjusting medications. Dr. Lowell guided Mitchell to the bed at the back, on the right. He pulled back the light blue curtain, and Mitchell saw his mother. The air left his lungs as if he'd been punched. Eleanor was lying in the hospital bed, so small, so fragile, so different from the strong woman he knew. A tube came out of her mouth, connected to a ventilator that did the work her lungs could no longer do on their own. Other tubes came from her arms, delivering medications and fluids. Wires connected her chest to monitors, displaying green lines going up and down, numbers flashing. "Mom," Mitchell whispered, taking a trembling step forward. Dr. Lowell stayed near the entrance to the bed space, giving privacy but remaining available. "You can touch her, hold her hand. Talk to her, even if it seems she's not listening. Many patients later report that they heard everything," the doctor encouraged, and then discreetly moved away, going to check on other patients, but keeping Mitchell in his field of vision. Mitchell approached the bed with slow steps, as if approaching something sacred and fragile that might break at the slightest sudden movement. He pulled up a chair and sat beside his mother, his eyes taking in every detail of her face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, allowing the blue veins underneath to show through. Her lips, which before were always curved in a gentle smile, now were colorless, stretched around the tube invading her mouth. There were deep circles under her eyes he had never noticed before. "Mom, I'm here," Mitchell said, taking her cold hand between his. Eleanor's hand was ice cold, and this frightened Mitchell more than anything else until that moment. Whenever he thought of his mother's hands, they were warm, welcoming, hands that stroked his head when he was a child, that prepared his favorite meals, that worked tirelessly to give him a better future. Now they were cold as ice, lifeless, just skin and bones. He wrapped them between his, trying to pass warmth, trying somehow to transfer his own life force to her. "I'm so sorry, Mom. So sorry for not being present, for growing distant, for always being too busy for you. If I could go back in time, I would do everything differently," Mitchell began, the words coming out in an uncontrolled flow, things he needed to say even without knowing if she could hear him. Tears were falling freely now, dripping onto their intertwined hands. "You didn't deserve such a selfish, ungrateful son. You gave me everything and I gave you nothing in return," he sobbed, lowering his head to rest on the edge of the bed. Suddenly he felt a movement, weak, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Eleanor's hand slightly squeezed Mitchell's fingers. He raised his head quickly, looking at her face with wide eyes of hope. Eleanor's eyelids trembled, struggling to open. Mitchell held his breath, squeezing her hand in response, encouraging her. "Mom, can you hear me? I'm here, right here with you," he said, leaning closer. Slowly, painfully slow, Eleanor's eyes opened just a crack. They were just 2 dark lines, but Mitchell saw the recognition there. She knew who he was. She knew her son was there. A faint sound escaped her, muffled by the tube. But it was a sound. It was communication. It was life. "Don't try to talk, Mom. Just rest. I'll stay here with you. I won't leave, I promise," said Mitchell, gently caressing her hand. Eleanor kept her eyes open for a few more seconds, staring at her son. Mitchell saw so many things in that gaze. Love, weariness, sadness, perhaps even forgiveness. How could so much be contained in such a weak look? He tried to engrave every detail in his memory, tried to absorb that moment because something inside him knew there wouldn't be many more. Her hand squeezed his once again, a little stronger this time, as if she were trying to say something that words couldn't. "I love you, Mom. I've always loved you, even when I didn't show it. Even when I was a terrible son, I always loved you," said Mitchell. And he needed her to know this, needed these words to reach her. Eleanor's eyes began to close again, the strength needed to keep them open being too much for her exhausted body. "Rest. It's okay. I'll be here when you wake up," whispered Mitchell. Eleanor's eyes closed completely, but her hand still held Mitchell's. He sat there in silence, listening to the rhythmic sound of the respirator, the constant beep of the monitors, the sounds of the ICU around. Other patients, other tragedies, other families suffering their own losses. But all of this was just background noise. Mitchell's world was reduced to that bed, that cold hand he was holding, that pale face he was watching. How long did he stay like that? He didn't know. It could have been minutes or hours. Time had completely lost its meaning. He watched his mother's chest rise and fall mechanically, pushed by the respirator. Each breath was one she couldn't take on her own, and that broke Mitchell's heart into ever smaller pieces. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Why did you face this alone?" he asked in a low voice, knowing there would be no answer. A nurse approached the bed, a young woman with hair tied in a tight bun and gentle eyes. She checked the monitors, wrote some things on a clipboard, adjusted one of the tubes. Mitchell watched her work, admiring the silent efficiency with which she moved. "Is she in pain?" Mitchell asked, his voice hoarse from crying. The nurse looked at him with a compassionate expression. "No, she's sedated and on strong painkillers. She's not feeling anything. We're keeping her as comfortable as possible," she answered, checking another device before continuing. "You can stay a few more minutes, but then you'll need to leave for a while to let us do the routine procedures." "You can come back in an hour," the nurse explained, and Mitchell nodded, although the idea of leaving his mother alone, even for an hour, was unbearable. "Will she be okay while I'm not here?" he asked, aware of how absurd the question was. The nurse smiled sadly, understanding perfectly what he was really asking. "We'll take very good care of her, you don't need to worry. She's being monitored 24 hours, any change and the whole team is here in seconds," she assured, finishing her checks. "Dr. Lowell will want to speak with you again soon. There are some papers that need to be signed and decisions that need to be discussed," the nurse warned before moving away to attend to another patient. Mitchell frowned. Decisions. What kind of decisions? A chill ran down his spine. Would they be decisions about resuscitation, about turning off machines, about letting her go? "Not yet, please. I'm not ready for these decisions yet," he thought, squeezing his mother's hand even tighter. He stayed there for a few more precious minutes, simply looking at her, trying to memorize every detail. The wrinkles around her eyes, witnesses to years of smiles and worries, the small scar on her forehead that she had since he was a child, the result of a household accident that he never knew exactly how it happened. The grey hair she never bothered to dye, saying they were medals of honor for a life well lived. Everything about her told a story, and Mitchell realized with horror that he didn't know half of these stories. He had wasted so much time, so many opportunities to really know his mother, to listen to her, to be present. And now it was too late. "I'll do better, Mum. If you stay, if there's some miracle, I promise I'll be the son you deserve," he whispered, knowing it was a promise he would probably never have the chance to keep. Finally, he forced himself to stand up. He leaned over and kissed his mother's forehead, his lips meeting the cold skin. "I'll be back soon, okay? Don't go anywhere without me," he said, trying to bring some lightness to the moment, but failing miserably. He released her hand slowly, reluctantly, each finger separating being a small death. He moved away from the bed, stepping backwards, unable to take his eyes off her, as if by stopping looking she might disappear. When he finally left the ICU, he felt as if he had left part of himself behind. The hospital corridor seemed even colder, even more hostile than before. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes, trying to breathe, trying to process everything that had just happened. Dr. Lowell found him there, standing in the corridor, clearly waiting for him. "Mitchell, we need to talk about the next steps." "There's a room over there where we can have privacy," said the doctor, indicating a nearby door. Mitchell nodded without the strength to resist. They entered a small meeting room with a table and a few chairs. The doctor closed the door, creating a bubble of isolation from the chaos of the hospital outside. They sat facing each other, and the doctor placed some folders on the table. "I know this is extremely difficult, but I need to discuss with you the options and decisions that need to be made regarding your mother's care," the doctor began, opening one of the folders. Mitchell felt his stomach turn. "What kind of decisions?" he asked, although he already suspected the answer. Dr. Lowell took a deep breath, preparing himself for another difficult conversation. "In cases like this, we need to know how far you want the medical team to go in terms of resuscitation measures. If her heart stops again, do you want us to perform cardiac massage, use a defibrillator, do everything possible to bring her back? Or would you prefer we let nature take its course?" the doctor explained, his words carefully chosen but still brutally direct. Mitchell felt as if he'd been punched. How could anyone make this kind of choice? How could he decide between fighting for his mother's life or letting her go? "I don't know, I can't think about this right now," Mitchell said, running his hands over his face, feeling the crushing weight of that decision. The doctor leaned slightly forward, his expression understanding but also firm. "I understand it's difficult, but we need this decision as soon as possible. Look, I'll be frank with you. If her heart stops again, the chances of resuscitation being successful are minimal. Her body is very weak, very compromised. Even if we could resuscitate her, it would only delay the inevitable by a few hours, and this process would be extremely traumatic for her," Dr. Lowell explained, and there was an honest gentleness in his words that made Mitchell trust him. "So you're saying I should let her die? Is that it?" Mitchell asked, his voice laden with pain and anger, directed not at the doctor, but at the impossible situation in which he found himself. The doctor slowly shook his head, choosing his words with even more care. "I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm giving you the information so you can make an informed decision. If you want us to perform all resuscitation procedures, we will. But I need you to understand that this would probably cause more suffering than help. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone we love is to let them go in peace," said the doctor. And Mitchell knew he was right, knew deep in his heart that prolonging his mother's suffering wasn't love. It was selfishness. But how to accept this? How to sign a paper that was essentially a death sentence? "Is she suffering now?" Mitchell asked, needing to know. The doctor immediately shook his head. "No, she's sedated and comfortable. She's not feeling pain. She's not aware of what's happening around her. If there's any sign of discomfort, we'll increase the medication. Our goal now is to ensure she goes through this with dignity and without suffering," Dr. Lowell answered, and there was sincerity in his words that minimally comforted Mitchell. "Then if it's for her not to suffer, if it's for her to have peace, I choose not to resuscitate. If her heart stops, let her go," said Mitchell, and each word was like tearing out a piece of his own soul. The tears returned with full force, and he didn't try to hide them. "But as long as she's still alive, as long as there's a thread of hope, you do everything to keep her comfortable, everything to give me more time with her, all right?" he asked. The doctor nodded, making notes on one of the papers. "We will do exactly that. She will continue receiving all care, all medications necessary to keep her stable and comfortable. We just won't perform invasive resuscitation procedures if we reach that point," the doctor confirmed, pushing a form across the table. "I need you to sign here, acknowledging that you had this conversation with me and that this is your decision," he requested, offering a pen. Mitchell took the pen with trembling hands. He looked at the paper, at the formal and cold words that translated the hardest decision of his life. He signed where indicated, his signature coming out shaky and almost illegible. "Done," he said, pushing the paper back, feeling as if he had signed much more than just a medical form. Dr. Lowell took the paper and placed it back in the folder. "Thank you for having this difficult conversation with me." "I know it wasn't easy," he said, standing up. Mitchell also stood up, feeling his legs as heavy as lead. "Can I go back to be with her?" he asked, needing to be by his mother's side, needing to cherish every second they still had together. The doctor checked his watch. "The team should have finished the routine procedures by now. Yes, you can go back. And Mitchell, if you need anything, any questions, any support, just look for me or ask any nurse to call me, all right?" offered the doctor, placing a hand on Mitchell's shoulder in a gesture of support. Mitchell nodded, grateful for the kindness of this man who was essentially a stranger, but who was guiding him through the worst moment of his life. He returned to the ICU with slow steps, as if each step took him closer to a reality he didn't want to face. He entered and went straight to his mother's bed. She looked exactly as he had left her, motionless, pale, surrounded by machines. He sat down again in the chair beside the bed and took her hand. Still cold, still fragile, but still there. "I'm back, Mum. I promised I'd come back, and here I am," he said, gently caressing the back of her hand. He sat there in silence, watching, waiting, praying to some higher power that he wasn't sure he believed in. Time passed in a blur of monitor beeps and soft footsteps of nurses. Mitchell didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't move from the chair. His vigil was all he could offer now. Suddenly, without warning, the monitors began to go off. The sharp and urgent sound of the alarms cut through the ICU air like a siren. Mitchell jumped from the chair, his heart racing in instant panic. "What's happening? What's wrong?" he shouted, looking frantically between his mother and the monitors flashing red numbers. Nurses appeared out of nowhere, running from all sides, surrounding Eleanor's bed in a matter of seconds. A nurse gently but firmly pushed Mitchell aside. "Sir, you need to get out of the way. Let us work," she said. But Mitchell couldn't move, couldn't take his eyes off his mother. Dr. Lowell appeared running, pushing an emergency cart. "She's having a cardiac arrest. Pressure dropping, critical saturation. We need to intubate again now," the doctor shouted to the team. Mitchell saw everything happen as if in slow motion. He saw the team's agile hands moving over his mother's body, saw someone preparing syringes, saw another adjusting the ventilator. The alarms continued to sound, that horrible noise that meant life was slipping away. "Mom! No, Mom, hang on!" Mitchell shouted, trying to get closer, but firm hands held him back. They were two nurses pulling him away from the bed. "Sir, you need to leave now. You can't stay here during the procedure," one of them said, pushing Mitchell toward the exit. He resisted, fought, tried to stay, but it was 2 against 1 and he was emotionally too weak to really fight. "She needs me. You can't take me away from here," he protested, his voice breaking in desperation. The nurses managed to take him outside the ICU, and the door closed behind him with a final and terrible sound. Mitchell punched the door, helpless, desperate. "Please let her be okay, please," he repeated like a mantra, as if the words had the power to change fate. Through the small window in the door, he could see figures moving, could see the agitation, the urgency. But he couldn't see his mother, blocked by the bodies of the medical team around her. Seconds dragged on like hours. Every beep, every sound that leaked through the door was torture. Mitchell slid down the door until he sat on the cold floor of the hallway, his head in his hands, his body shaking with sobs he could no longer control. "She can't die, not yet. I haven't said everything I need to say. I haven't properly asked for forgiveness yet, not yet," he mumbled to the floor, to the indifferent universe, to anyone who might be listening to his desperate pleas. The hours dragged on like an endless eternity. Mitchell remained seated on the cold corridor floor, leaning against the wall next to the ICU door, unable to move away even if he wanted to. His legs were numb, his back ached, but none of that mattered. Every sound coming from inside the ICU made his heart jump. Every movement he saw through the small window made him hold his breath. Nurses were constantly coming and going, their serious and concentrated faces revealing nothing about what was happening in there. Mitchell tried asking a few times, but the answers were always the same, evasive, professional. "The team is working, sir. As soon as there's news, someone will come talk to you," they would say, before disappearing again through those doors that seemed increasingly insurmountable. "Please just tell me if she's alive, just that. I just need to know that," Mitchell begged a passing nurse, but she just gently touched his shoulder before continuing on her way. Night fell without Mitchell noticing the change. The corridor windows showed a gradually darkening sky, but inside the hospital time didn't exist in the same way. The fluorescent lights remained on with the same relentless intensity, creating a timeless environment where there was no difference between day and night. Other people appeared in the hallway, other families waiting for news of their loved ones. Mitchell observed them vaguely, seeing his own fears and anguish reflected in their faces. An elderly man cried silently in a chair. A young woman paced back and forth while talking on the phone in a low voice. A couple embraced near the window. all trapped in the same limbo of waiting and uncertainty, all fighting against the same powerlessness in the face of life's fragility. So I'm not alone in this hell, but that doesn't make it easier, thought Mitchell, closing his tired eyes that stung from so much crying. Around midnight, Dr. Lowell finally came out of the ICU. His coat was wrinkled, there were new lines of fatigue on his face, and he carried the weight of hours of intense work. Mitchell stood up so quickly that he became dizzy, his legs protesting after hours in the same position. He staggered slightly but regained his balance, rushing to the doctor with his heart racing. "Doctor, how is she? Please tell me she's alive," said Mitchell, his voice hoarse from so long without speaking and from all the tears shed. The doctor looked at him with an expression that was difficult to decipher, a mixture of exhaustion and something that could be cautious hope. "She's alive, Mitchell. We managed to stabilize her again, but it was very close. Her body is fighting, but it's very weak," the doctor replied, and Mitchell felt his knees almost give way with relief. Mitchell held Dr. Lowell's arm, needing physical support to remain standing. "Can I see her?" "I need to see her now. I need to know that she's really okay," he asked, knowing that okay was a relative term in that context, but needing to see with his own eyes that his mother was still breathing. The doctor hesitated, looking back toward the ICU, clearly pondering whether it was a good idea. "She's sedated again. She won't recognize you this time, but if you promise to be brief and not interfere with the team's work, you can go in for a few minutes," the doctor conceded, and Mitchell nodded vigorously, willing to agree to any condition. They went back to the ICU together, and when Mitchell entered and saw his mother still there, still breathing even if it was with the help of machines, he felt a gratitude so intense it almost knocked him down. Thank you for saving her," Mitchell said to the doctor, his voice breaking. Dr. Lowell placed a hand on Mitchell's shoulder, that gesture that had already become familiar. "Don't thank me yet. The night is going to be long and critical. The next few hours will determine whether her body can hold on or not. I'm going to stay here at the hospital, on call, personally monitoring her case," the doctor explained, and there was a dedication in his words that went beyond professionalism. Mitchell realized that this man really cared, that it wasn't just another case for him. "Doctor, be honest with me, what are the real chances of her surviving the night?" asked Mitchell, needing the truth, even if it hurt to hear it. The doctor sighed deeply, carefully choosing his words. "Honestly, 50%, maybe less. Her body suffered a lot, the heart is weak, the organs are compromised, but she's a fighter, that much is clear." "So I don't lose hope completely," replied Dr. Lowell, and it was the most honest answer Mitchell could expect. Mitchell approached his mother's bedside again, pulling the same chair as before. He sat down and took Eleanor's cold hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm going to stay here all night, Mum. I won't leave you alone for even a second. Keep fighting, please, keep fighting," he whispered, leaning in to kiss her forehead. Her skin was even colder than before, and that frightened him, but he forced himself not to think about what that might mean. He stayed there holding her hand, watching the mechanical movement of her chest rising and falling, counting each breath as if it were precious. Because it was. Each breath was one more she managed to take, one more moment she remained in the world, one more second they had together. "I can't leave me now, not like this. Not before I have the chance to fix things between us," Mitchell murmured, tears silently falling again. A different nurse approached, an older woman with grey hair and a kind face that suggested decades of experience. "Sir, you need to rest too. There's a family restroom on the second floor with sofas where you can lie down for a bit," she suggested, checking the monitors as she spoke. Mitchell immediately shook his head, refusing without hesitation. "No, I can't leave here. What if she wakes up and I'm not here? What if she needs me and I'm not by her side?" he replied, his voice loaded with determination. The nurse smiled understandingly, clearly accustomed to this type of response. "I understand, but at least let me bring you a blanket and a pillow. It's going to be a long, cold night," she offered, and Mitchell accepted with a grateful nod. "Thank you. You are very kind," he said, touched by this stranger's concern. The nurse returned minutes later with a thin blanket and a small pillow. "If you need anything at all, just press the call button there," she said, indicating a red button on the wall near the bed. Mitchell thanked her again, wrapping himself in the blanket more for having something familiar than for actually feeling cold. The hospital temperature was controlled, kept constant, but he felt cold to the bone, a cold that came from within and that no blanket could warm. It was the cold of fear, of the possibility of loss, of death's proximity. He adjusted himself in the uncomfortable chair, finding a position where he could rest but still keep his hand on his mother's. He wouldn't sleep, he knew that, but at least he could close his eyes for a few moments. "Stay with me, Mom, don't leave me here alone," he whispered in the darkness of the ICU, where only the lights from the monitors blinked like small artificial stars. The early morning hours were the longest of Mitchell's entire life. The hospital got quieter, less movement in the corridors, fewer voices, just the constant sound of the machines, the regular beep of the monitors, the occasional footsteps of nurses making their rounds. Mitchell alternated between watching his mother's face and watching the numbers on the monitors, not really understanding what they meant, but looking for any change, any sign. Around 3 in the morning, one of the monitors emitted a different sound, making Mitchell jump in fright. A nurse appeared immediately, checked, adjusted something, and the sound stopped. "Everything's fine, it was just a routine check alarm," she explained, but Mitchell's heart took several minutes to return to its normal rhythm. Each unexpected sound was a heart attack, each abrupt movement of the devices a new reason for panic. "I don't know how much more of these emotional roller coasters I can take," he thought, passing a tired hand over his face. Around 5 in the morning, Mitchell finally gave in to fatigue. He didn't sleep deeply, but entered a semi-conscious state where the world around became hazy. He dreamed of his mother, but not as she was now. He dreamed of her young, strong smiling while preparing breakfast in the kitchen of the old house where he grew up. He dreamed of her singing while hanging clothes on the clothesline, of her reading stories to him before bedtime when he was a child, of her applauding at his graduation. All the good memories, all the moments he had neglected in favor of adult concerns and empty ambitions. When he woke with a start, disoriented, it took a few seconds to remember where he was. His mother's hand was still in his, still cold but still there. The sky through the window was beginning to lighten with the first signs of dawn. She made it through the night. She managed to make it through the night, thought Mitchell, feeling a wave of renewed hope. Dr. Lowell appeared shortly after dawn, looking as tired as Mitchell felt. His eyes were red. There were deep shadows under them, but he was smiling slightly. "Good morning, Mitchell. I have good news. Your mother made it through the night. Her vital signs remained relatively stable. We're going to reduce the sedation slowly to see how she responds," announced the doctor, making notes on a clipboard while checking the monitors. Mitchell rose quickly, the blanket falling from the chair. "Does that mean she's going to wake up? Will I be able to talk to her?" he asked, hope coloring his voice for the first time in hours. The doctor nodded cautiously. "Yes, but we don't know what state she'll be in. She may be confused, disoriented, very weak. We need to let her wake up naturally in her own time. Don't force it, don't ask too many questions, just be present," the doctor advised, and Mitchell agreed anxiously. It took about an hour for the sedation to start reversing. Mitchell observed every small sign, every flutter of eyelids, every subtle movement of fingers. He constantly squeezed his mother's hand, offering his presence as an anchor for her to return. "Mom, I'm here, you can come back, everything's all right, you're safe," he repeated softly, like a gentle mantra. Finally, Eleanor's eyes began to move under her closed eyelids, rapid movements, as if she were dreaming. Then slowly her eyelids trembled and began to open. Mitchell held his breath, leaning in closer. "Mom, can you hear me?" he asked softly, hardly daring to believe she was actually waking up. Eleanor's eyes opened completely, vague at first, unfocused, but then they found her son's face and something in them changed. Recognition. "You're here, my son. You're really here," she whispered in a hoarse, weak voice. Mitchell felt tears flowing freely down his face, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. "Yes, Mom, I'm here. I've been here all night. I haven't left your side for even a second," he replied, gently squeezing her hand. Eleanor tried to smile, but even that small movement seemed to require all her energy. Her gaze wandered around the ICU, seeing the tubes, the machines, gradually understanding where she was and why. "I'm very sick, aren't I?" she asked, and it wasn't really a question but a statement seeking confirmation. Mitchell didn't know how to respond, Didn't want to lie, but also didn't want to take away all hope. "You're in the hospital, the doctors are taking care of you, you're going to be fine," he said, but the words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Eleanor looked at him with those eyes that knew her son better than he knew himself. "Don't lie to me, son, I can feel it. I can feel my body giving up," she said, and her voice carried a quiet certainty that broke Mitchell's heart. Mitchell shook his head vehemently, refusing to accept that truth. "Don't talk like that, Mum. You're going to be fine. You just need to keep fighting. Stay strong," he insisted, his voice breaking at the end. Eleanor squeezed his hand with surprising strength, considering her condition. "Mitchell, I need to tell you some things while I still can, while I still have strength," she said, and there was urgency in her tone that made Mitchell stop protesting. She took a deep breath, or tried to, the effort clearly costing her dearly. "I'm not going to make it, son, I feel it. My body is tired, it has fought too much, and I think it's time to rest," she continued, each word coming out slowly, paused, as if she were using her last reserves of energy. Mitchell felt the world crumbling again. "No, Mum, don't say that. Please don't give up," he begged, now holding her hand with both of his. Eleanor looked at her son with tears in her eyes, tears that slowly ran down her temples until they disappeared into the pillow. "Forgive me, son, forgive me for not being the perfect mother you deserved," she said. And Mitchell almost fell off his chair at the absurdity of that statement. She was asking for forgiveness? She who had sacrificed everything for him? "Mom, you were the best mother in the world. You gave me everything. Worked yourself to death to give me a future. I should be the one asking for forgiveness for being a terrible son," Mitchell responded, the words coming out in a desperate rush. Eleanor weakly shook her head on the pillow. "You weren't terrible. You were just living your life, building your own path. That's what I always wanted for you," she said, her voice becoming even weaker, each word a visible effort. Mitchell leaned closer, holding his mother's face with one hand while the other remained intertwined with hers. "Mom, I was selfish. I pulled away when you needed me most, let my problems consume me, and forgot about the most important person in my life," he confessed, letting all barriers fall, all masks, all shame and pride. Eleanor raised her free hand with difficulty and touched her son's face, her fingers trembling with the effort. "You're here now. That's all that matters. You're here when I really need you," she said, and there was genuine forgiveness in her words. Mitchell kissed the palm of her hand, wetting it with his tears. "I love you, Mum. I love you so much, never doubt that, even when I wasn't present. Even when I failed to show it, I always loved you," he declared, needing her to know, needing those words to be said while there was still time. Eleanor smiled, a weak but genuine smile that briefly lit up her pale face. "I know, son, I always knew. A mother always knows these things. And I love you too. You have always been my greatest pride, my greatest joy, the reason why every sacrifice was worth it," she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper now. She closed her eyes for a moment, clearly exhausted by the conversation, but opened them again with effort. "Promise me something. Promise that you'll take care of yourself, that you'll be happy, that you'll live life completely, not just halfway," she asked, and Mitchell nodded vigorously, willing to promise anything she asked. "I promise, Mom, I promise I'll do better. I'll live in a way that would make you proud," he replied, meaning every word, even through the tears that wouldn't stop falling. Eleanor smiled again, seeming satisfied with the promise. "Take care of yourself, all right? Take care of yourself for me," she repeated, and then her eyes began to close again. Mitchell felt panic rise. "Mom? Mom, don't close your eyes, stay with me," he said, squeezing her hand, but Eleanor's eyes continued to slowly close. "I just need to rest a little, I'm so tired," she murmured, her voice fading until it was almost inaudible. Mitchell looked desperately at the monitors, but the numbers seemed stable. She was just sleeping, just resting, or that's what he tried to convince himself. "Rest, Mom, I'll be here when you wake up," he said, kissing her forehead, feeling how cold she was, how her body seemed to be slowly cooling. "You won't leave me, will you? You promised you would stay," he whispered, even knowing there was no such promise. He stayed there for a few more minutes, watching his mother sleep, or rest, or whatever she was doing. The movement of her chest continued, mechanical, pushed by the respirator. The monitors continued their constant beeps. But something had changed. Mitchell felt as if he had just said goodbye, as if those exchanged words were final. He didn't want to believe it, fought against that thought with all his strength, but it persisted heavy in his chest. A nurse approached silently. "Sir, it would be good for you to step out for a moment, have some coffee, eat something, take a walk. She's going to rest for a while now, and you need to take care of yourself too," she suggested gently. Mitchell was going to refuse, as he always refused, but suddenly felt too exhausted to argue. "Just a few minutes, I'll be back in a few minutes," he agreed, rising from the chair on legs that barely supported him. He reluctantly let go of his mother's hand, each finger separating being a small agony. He leaned in one last time, kissed her cold forehead, and whispered too softly for anyone but her to hear. "I love you, Mum, I'll be right back," he promised, and then forced himself to move away, to leave the bedside, to cross the ICU to the exit. Each step was heavy, loaded with the feeling that he was leaving something precious behind. He left the ICU and the hospital corridor seemed brighter, louder, more alive than he remembered. Or maybe he was just too numb. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes, trying to breathe, trying to process everything that had just happened. She said goodbye, that was a goodbye, I know it was, he thought. And the pain of this realization was physical, a crushing weight on his chest that made it difficult to breathe. It was then that a nurse he didn't recognize approached him in the corridor. She was a middle-aged woman with a friendly smile and a brown envelope in her hands. "Sir, sorry to bother you, but we found this among your mother's belongings when she was admitted to the emergency room. These are documents that seemed important, and we thought you should receive them," she said, extending the envelope to Mitchell. He automatically took it, without really processing, his mind still trapped in that ICU bed with his mother. "Thank you," he murmured, holding the envelope without looking at it. The nurse nodded and walked away, returning to her duties. Mitchell stood there staring at the envelope in his hands as if it were an alien object. Mother's belongings, important documents. Curiosity finally overcame the numbness, and he opened the seal, removing the contents. Inside were several carefully organized and folded papers. Mitchell began to flip through them, without really paying attention at first, but then something caught his eye. A deed. He stopped, looked closer. It was a property deed in Eleanor's name. A farm. He frowned, confused. His mother didn't have a farm, had never mentioned anything about properties. He continued flipping through. More deeds. A house in another city. A plot of land. Bank statements with numbers that made Mitchell have to look twice to make sure he was reading correctly. Company stocks, investments, financial applications. Each paper he looked at revealed more wealth, more assets, more money. The envelope fell from his trembling hands, papers scattering across the hallway floor. Mitchell stood paralyzed, looking at those documents, unable to process what he was seeing. "This can't be right, it can't be hers. There must be a mistake," he said aloud to no one in particular. He knelt down and began picking up the papers with violently shaking hands. He examined each one more carefully now, looking for some error, some indication that this wasn't real. But all the documents were in Eleanor's full name, all authentic, all properly registered. She had properties worth millions. She had investments that yielded more per month than Mitchell had earned in years. She had savings that could support a family for generations. His mother, who had always lived so simply, who wore the same apron for years, who economized on everything, was a millionaire, rich, absurdly rich. How? Why? Why did she never tell me? Mitchell asked the air, his mind spinning, trying to make sense of it all. And then a single word shot through his consciousness like lightning. Inheritance. If his mother died, all of this would be his. Mitchell felt immediate nausea at having this thought. He put his hand over his mouth, fighting against the urge to vomit right there in the hallway. What kind of monster was he to think about money while his mother was dying? But the thought was there, planted, refusing to leave. All that wealth, all those properties, all that money that would solve all his problems, pay all his debts, save his business, his home, his life. Only if his mother died. He shook his head violently, trying to expel these horrible thoughts. No, I don't care about money. I just want my mother alive, that's all that matters, he muttered to himself, trying to convince himself, trying to suffocate the dark part of his mind that was already calculating, already considering. She's dying anyway, there's nothing that can change that, so technically, he began to think, but violently interrupted himself, horrified. It was at that moment that Dr. Lowell appeared in the hallway, walking quickly with an expression that Mitchell couldn't identify. The doctor saw him kneeling on the floor surrounded by papers and frowned. "Mitchell, is everything all right?" "What happened?" he asked, approaching. Mitchell began gathering the papers quickly, stuffing them back into the envelope without order, without care, just wanting to hide them, make them disappear. "Nothing. Just some documents from my mother, nothing important," he lied, standing up on wobbly legs. Dr. Lowell continued looking at him with concern, but decided not to press. Instead, his expression changed to something that looked like contained excitement. "Mitchell, I need to talk to you. I have important news," said the doctor. And there was something in his voice that made Mitchell momentarily forget the documents and pay full attention. Dr. Lowell placed his hands on Mitchell's shoulders, looking directly into his eyes. "I spent the whole night making calls, consulting colleagues, looking for options. And I got something. There's a specialist, one of the best oncologists in the country, a man who has specific experience with the exact type of cancer your mother has," the doctor began, and Mitchell felt his heart race. "I managed to speak with him personally, explained the case, sent all the exams. He says there's a chance, Mitchell, a real chance to treat this," Dr. Lowell continued, his voice carrying a hope that Mitchell didn't dare to feel. "What? But you said there was nothing to be done, that it was terminal," said Mitchell, confused, torn between hope and disbelief. The doctor nodded. "I said that based on what we know here, what we can do in this hospital. But this specialist has access to experimental treatments, new therapies that aren't available here," he explained. Mitchell felt as if the ground was moving beneath his feet. "So she can survive? She can really survive?" he asked, hardly daring to believe. Dr. Lowell made a gesture with his hand, urging caution. "I'm not promising miracles, Mitchell. The chances still aren't high, but there's a chance where before there was none. The treatment is aggressive, it's going to be difficult, it's going to demand a lot from her, but the specialist believes it's worth trying," the doctor detailed, and then came the crucial part. "But there's a problem. He works in a private clinic in another city. The transfer needs to be made today, now, in the next few hours, while she's still relatively stable. And the costs are very high, we're talking hundreds of thousands in treatment," said Dr. Lowell. And those words fell like bombs. Mitchell looked at the envelope in his hands, then at the doctor, then at the envelope again. Hundreds of thousands. The cost of saving his mother. And there in his hands was more than enough to pay. Documents proving that his mother had resources, had means, had everything necessary for her own treatment. He could use that money to save her. Should use that money to save her. It was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. But then his mind, that dark and calculating part that he hated but couldn't silence, whispered other possibilities. If she recovered, she would live for years. Years spending that money. Years he wouldn't have access to it. Years where his own life would continue to crumble. If she died, as all the doctors had previously said would happen, he would inherit everything. All his problems would be solved. "We need to transfer her today, Mitchell. Every hour counts. I need your authorization to make the arrangements," insisted Dr. Lowell, waiting for an answer. Mitchell was paralyzed, his brain locked between two impossible realities. Save his mother or save himself. Do the right thing or do the thing that would solve his life. Love or greed. Humanity or monstrosity. The envelope weighed in his hands as if it contained lead instead of paper. His heart was beating so hard that he could hear it in his ears, drowning out all other sounds in the hospital. Images flashed through his mind at impossible speed. His mother fallen on the floor at home, his mother in the ICU bed, his mother saying goodbye, his mother asking for forgiveness when it should be him asking. And then other images. His debts, his house being taken, his life in ruins, the opportunity to start over without the crushing weight of failure. Two roads diverging in front of him, and whichever one he chose would forever change who he was. "Mitchell, I need an answer, son. Time is passing," said Dr. Lowell, the urgency clear in his voice. Mitchell looked at the envelope in his hands, then at Dr. Lowell, then back at the envelope. His brain was working at a frantic pace, calculating, processing, weighing options. If his mother went to this specialist and the treatment worked, She could live another 5, 10, maybe 15 years. Years during which she would have complete control over that fortune he had just discovered. She could spend it all on treatments, on travel, on charity, on anything she wanted. She could even change her will, donate everything to institutions, leave him with nothing. On the other hand, all the doctors until that moment had said the same thing. She was dying. It was terminal. There was no cure. This specialist was just a last desperate attempt, probably doomed to failure. If she died naturally, as she was destined to die, he would inherit everything. Millions, properties, a lifetime of financial security. What kind of monster thinks like this about his own mother? Mitchell asked himself. But the answer came quick and cruel. The kind of monster who is desperate, bankrupt, without options. Dr. Lowell gently touched Mitchell's arm, bringing him back to the present moment. Mitchell, I know it's a lot of information at once, but we really need to make a decision now. The specialist can only receive her today. He has an open window in his schedule that won't last long, insisted the doctor, and there was genuine urgency in his voice, the urgency of someone who truly believed they were offering a chance at life. Mitchell swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry as sandpaper. His mind continued coldly calculating while his heart screamed that he was about to do something unforgivable. But cold logic prevailed, the logic that told him he needed that money, that he deserved that money after everything he'd been through, that his mother was dying anyway, so why not secure his own future? Doctor, I'll take her, Mitchell said, and the words came out before he could reconsider, before the human part of him could intervene. Dr. Lowell smiled broadly, clearly relieved and satisfied with the decision. Excellent. I'll start making arrangements immediately. We need to coordinate with the specialist's clinic, prepare the ambulance for transport, organize all the necessary medical paperwork, he said, already beginning to turn to make the necessary calls. Mitchell felt panic rising, his mind working even faster. Ambulance, medical team accompanying, records of where she was being taken, trails, witnesses. This wouldn't work. He needed another way, needed to have complete control of the situation. Doctor, wait, Mitchell said, grabbing the doctor's arm and making him stop. I'll take her in my car. I'll put her in the back seat and drive to the clinic right now, he continued, keeping his voice as steady and controlled as possible, trying to sound like a dedicated son and not like what he was actually planning. Dr. Lowell frowned immediately, his expression changing from relief to concern. Mitchell, I don't know if that's a good idea. Your mother is very fragile. She needs constant monitoring during transport. She needs medical equipment available in case something goes wrong on the way, the doctor argued, and they were valid, sensible arguments that any rational person would take into consideration. But Mitchell wasn't being rational. He was being calculating. He needed a convincing response, something that would make the doctor agree without suspecting anything. Doctor, you yourself said that time is essential, that every hour counts. How long will it take to organize an ambulance? 1 hour, 2, 3? I can leave here in 15 minutes with her in my car. How far is the clinic? Mitchell asked, using the doctor's own urgency against him. The doctor hesitated, clearly torn between the logic of Mitchell's argument and his legitimate medical concerns. The clinic is about 2 hours by car from here, but Mitchell, do you understand the risks? If something happens on the way, if she has another cardiac arrest, you won't be able to help her. She could die before you get there, the doctor explained, and Mitchell had to fight against the urge to smile ironically, because that was exactly what he was counting on. Instead, he put on the most sincere and concerned expression he could manage. I understand the risks, doctor, but I also understand that without this treatment, she will certainly die. At least this way there's a chance, even if it's small. And I want to give her that chance, no matter what it costs, Mitchell said. And the words were so beautiful, so noble, so completely opposite to what he really felt that he almost convinced himself of his own lie. The doctor looked at Mitchell for a long moment, studying his face, searching for something he couldn't identify. Finally, he sighed deeply and nodded, clearly against his better judgment, but unable to argue against the apparent determination of a son wanting to save his mother. All right, but you'll sign a liability waiver, assuming all risks of transport. And I'll give you detailed instructions on what to do if something goes wrong on the way, signs you need to watch for. Emergency numbers to call, Dr. Lowell said, already walking toward the nursing station to get the necessary forms. Mitchell followed him, his heart beating hard, but not from fear or concern for his mother, but from nervous anticipation of what he was about to do. "Thank you, Doctor. You don't know how much this means to me, to her," Mitchell said, maintaining the charade perfectly. The next 20 minutes were a blur of paperwork and instructions. Mitchell signed form after form, only superficially looking at what he was signing, not really caring about the legal terms or responsibilities he was assuming. Dr. Lowell spoke at length about vital signs, about how to check breathing, about when to call emergency services, but Mitchell just nodded automatically, pretending to pay attention while his mind was completely elsewhere. He was calculating routes, thinking of deserted roads, remote places where there would be no cameras or witnesses. He was planning every detail of what he would do once he left the hospital. "Mitchell, are you listening?" "This is important," said Dr. Lowell, noticing the distant expression on his face. Mitchell blinked and focused back on the doctor. Yes, I'm listening. Sorry, I'm just nervous about the trip," he lied, offering a tense smile. Finally, all the paperwork was complete. Dr. Lowell organized a team of nurses to help transfer Eleanor from the ICU to Mitchell's car. "We'll sedate her a bit more for the journey, ensure she stays comfortable and doesn't wake up midway, which could cause panic and additional stress to her body," the doctor explained as they walked back to the ICU. Mitchell nodded and internally thanked him for it. It would be easier to do what he needed to do if she were unconscious, if she didn't look at him, if she didn't ask questions. They entered the ICU, and the doctor instructed a nurse to increase the sedation. "It will take a few minutes to take full effect. Then we can disconnect her from the equipment here and move her," said the nurse, adjusting the intravenous drip. Mitchell stood by his mother's bedside looking at her and felt a pang of something that might be remorse or guilt, but he quickly suppressed it. "That's for my own good, and she was going to die anyway. I'm not really doing anything other than accepting the inevitable," he rationalized to himself. The sedation took effect, and Eleanor sank into a deep sleep, her breathing becoming even slower and more regular. The nurses worked efficiently, disconnecting the monitors, removing some of the less essential tubes, preparing her for transport. They brought a specialized wheelchair, and with careful, coordinated movements transferred Eleanor from the hospital bed to the chair. She looked so small, so fragile, wrapped in hospital blankets, her head fallen to one side, completely unaware of the world around her. Mitchell pushed the wheelchair, following the nurses through the hospital corridors toward the parking lot. People looked as they passed, other patients, visitors, staff, all probably thinking it was just another routine medical transfer. No one suspected they were witnessing the beginning of something terrible. "Almost there, Mother. Almost time to go," Mitchell muttered, more to himself than to her. They reached the parking lot, and Mitchell indicated where his car was. The nurses helped place Eleanor in the back seat, laying her down carefully, adjusting the blankets, ensuring she was as comfortable as possible. One of them handed Mitchell a bag with some basic medical supplies. "Here's some gauze, band-aids, some emergency medications that Dr. Lowell selected. And here's the address of the specialist's clinic and his phone number." "He's already expecting the lady. He's been informed that you're on your way," explained the nurse. And Mitchell took everything with a grateful nod. Dr. Lowell appeared, having come directly from the ICU. "Mitchell, are you sure you want to do this? There's still time to wait for the ambulance. I can make some calls and speed up the process," the doctor offered one last time, and Mitchell had to admire the man's dedication, even as he planned to completely ignore all his advice. Mitchell extended his hand and firmly shook Dr. Lowell's. "I'm sure, Doctor. Thank you for everything you've done for my mother, for us." "I'll take her safely to the specialist, I promise," said Mitchell, looking directly into the doctor's eyes with a false sincerity that should have won an acting award. The doctor shook his hand back, nodding. "Drive carefully, don't rush. Keep her comfortable and call if anything changes. I'll have my phone at hand all the time," instructed the doctor, finally releasing Mitchell's hand. Mitchell got into the car, adjusted the mirrors, started the engine. He looked through the rearview mirror at his mother lying in the back seat, completely defenseless, completely at his mercy. For a brief second, something inside him screamed to stop, to turn back, to do the right thing. But he ignored that voice. "Let's go," he said to no one in particular, and accelerated out of the hospital parking lot. He drove normally for the first 20 minutes, following the flow of traffic, passing through busy city streets. Anyone who looked would see only a man driving carefully with someone sleeping in the back seat. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual. But as he moved away from the city center, as the streets became less busy and the buildings gave way to more residential areas and then to open fields, Mitchell began to deviate from the route he should have been following. Instead of taking the main highway that would lead to the specialist's clinic, he turned onto a secondary road, and then onto an even smaller one, and another. Further and further away from civilization, deeper and deeper into rural areas where there were no cameras, no witnesses, no one to see what he was about to do. Just a little more, I need to find the right place, it has to be perfect, Mitchell thought, his eyes scanning the surrounding landscape. After almost an hour of driving through increasingly deserted roads, Mitchell found what he was looking for. A dirt road that branched off from the already small rural road, leading to what appeared to be an area of abandoned farms. Trees on both sides created a green tunnel, isolating the area even more. There were no visible houses, no signs of human life, just empty fields and dense woods. It was perfect. So perfect it was almost as if the universe was conspiring to facilitate his crime. Mitchell turned onto that dirt road, the car rattling over the uneven terrain. He drove for a few more minutes until he was sure he was completely isolated, completely away from any possibility of being seen. Then he stopped the car, turned off the engine, and for a moment just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, the silence around broken only by the distant singing of birds. It's now or never. Either I do this or I go back and take her to the specialist, he thought, giving himself one last chance to choose humanity. But greed was stronger, more insistent, more seductive with its promises of financial salvation. Mitchell opened the car door and got out, his legs wobbly but functional. He walked to the back door and opened it, looking at his mother still deeply sedated, oblivious to everything. She was breathing regularly, calm, at peace. She had no idea what her own son was about to do to her. Mitchell leaned in, and with surprising care for someone about to commit such a horrible act, slid his arms under her body and lifted her. She was light, almost weightless, as if the disease had already consumed almost all physical substance she once possessed. He carried her away from the car, walking a few meters until he found a large tree with generous shade. There, with a gentleness that grotesquely contrasted with his intentions, he laid his mother on the ground, resting her head on the blankets he had brought from the hospital. "Forgive me for what I'm about to do, but I have no choice. I need to survive," he whispered. But he knew it was a lie, that there was always a choice, and he was making the wrong one. Mitchell stood up, looking at his mother lying there so vulnerable, so defenseless. Part of him expected to feel something, some overwhelming remorse, some guilt that would make him stop. But all he felt was a cold, calculating determination. He had gone too far to turn back now. If he returned, he would have to explain why he had deviated from the route, why he had taken so long. There would be questions, suspicions. No, the only option now was to proceed with the plan. He began walking back to the car, each step taking him further from his mother, further from humanity, closer to becoming a monster he wouldn't recognize in the mirror. She won't feel anything. She'll simply fall asleep and not wake up. It's almost merciful compared to dying in a hospital surrounded by tubes, he tried to convince himself, but he knew they were just pathetic rationalizations to justify the unjustifiable. That's when he heard it. A weak sound, almost imperceptible, but it was there, his mother's voice. "So, son," Eleanor called, and that single word made Mitchell freeze in place, his blood turning to ice in his veins. She was waking up. The sedation was wearing off faster than it should have, or perhaps the movement of being carried had awakened her. He didn't turn around, couldn't look at her. "Son, where are we? What's happening?" asked Eleanor, her voice hoarse and confused, laden with the weight of disorientation, but also with something more, a touch of growing fear. Mitchell closed his eyes tightly, his hands closing into tight fists. He had to continue, had to move forward. If he stopped now, everything would be lost. He took another step toward the car, then another, trying to block out her voice, trying not to hear. "Son, why are you leaving me here? Where are you going?" Eleanor called again, her voice growing stronger, more alert, more frightened. Mitchell kept walking, forcing one foot in front of the other, each step being a betrayal, each meter of distance being a condemnation of his soul. He heard his mother behind him, heard her trying to get up, heard the panic growing in her voice. "Son, Mitchell, what are you doing? Please don't leave me here," Eleanor shouted, and now there was real terror in her words. The terror of someone beginning to understand that something terribly wrong was happening. Mitchell reached the car, his hand on the door handle, the last possible moment to turn back, the last chance to be human. He glanced over his shoulder, a quick look, and saw his mother trying to stand up, too weak to get on her feet, falling back down, extending a trembling hand toward him. His eyes met hers, and in that brief second he saw everything. Saw the exact moment she understood, when she realized what her son was doing, when her world collapsed. "Please, son, don't do this. Please, I love you, please," Eleanor begged, tears already streaming down her pale face. Mitchell opened the car door and got in, his hands shaking so violently he could barely put the key in the ignition. Behind him he could hear his mother screaming, calling his name, begging, pleading. Each word was a knife in his chest, each sob a blow to his conscience. But he started the engine, the sound partially muffling her screams. "Son! Son, I'll die here. Please, don't abandon me. I'm your mother. I gave you everything, please," Eleanor screamed, her voice breaking in absolute despair. And Mitchell had to close his eyes, had to block it out, had to turn it into background noise, otherwise he wouldn't be able to do it. He stepped on the accelerator, the car moving forward, leaving her behind. "Mitchell, come back, please. Don't leave me here. I love you. I've always loved you," Eleanor shouted with the last strength she had, her voice gradually fading as the car drove away. Mitchell drove without looking back, tears running down his face, but not stopping, not slowing down, not reconsidering. He blocked out his mother's screams, blocked the image of her extending her hand, blocked everything except the road ahead. He needed to get far away, needed to establish an alibi, needed to make it seem like he tried to take her to the specialist, but something went wrong on the way. He was already crafting the story in his mind. He would say she had a cardiac arrest during the trip, that he stopped to try to help, that when he stepped out to seek help, she simply disappeared, confused, disoriented by the medications. He would say he searched for hours, but couldn't find her. That he called the authorities as soon as he realized she was lost. It was a plausible story, full of holes, but it would work if he kept calm and remained consistent. "She was going to die anyway. All the doctors said so. I'm just speeding up the inevitable," he repeated to himself like a mantra, trying to calm the storm of emotions in his chest. He drove back to the city, following different routes than those he had used to leave, ensuring it would be more difficult to trace his exact movements. When he reached a more populated area, he stopped at a gas station and used the public phone to call the hospital. "I need to speak with Dr. Lowell. It's an emergency. It's about my mother," he said when the receptionist answered, forcing panic into his voice, forcing desperation that wasn't completely false, because part of him, a small, muffled part, really was panicking about what he had just done. Dr. Lowell answered quickly. "Mitchell, what happened? Did you arrive at the clinic?" the doctor immediately asked. Mitchell took a deep breath, preparing himself for the performance of his life. "Doctor, something terrible happened. I need help. I don't know what to do," he began, letting his voice tremble, making it seem like he was on the verge of collapse. Dr. Lowell became immediately alert, his voice turning tense. "Mitchell, tell me what happened. Where are you? Where is your mother?" He fired the questions. Mitchell began to weave his lie, each word carefully chosen, each detail designed to sound credible. "We were on the road, going to the clinic, and suddenly she started getting agitated. Even though sedated, she started moving a lot. I got worried, thought she was having some reaction. So I stopped the car at a station to check on her and to call for guidance," Mitchell invented, and he could almost hear himself believing his own lie. "But when I went out to use the phone, when I returned to the car, she had gotten out, doctor. She simply wasn't there anymore. I think she woke up confused, disoriented by the medications, and left the car without me seeing," he continued, forcing anguish into every word. There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. "What? Mitchell, your mother could barely stand. How could she just get out of the car and disappear?" Dr. Lowell questioned, and Mitchell could hear the disbelief beginning to form in his voice. He needed to be more convincing, needed to sell the story better. "I don't know, doctor, I swear I don't know. I just left for 2 minutes, maybe 3, and when I came back she was gone. I looked everywhere, searched the station, the streets around, asked people, but nobody saw anything. I'm desperate, doctor. I don't know what to do. She's out there alone, sick, confused. She could be anywhere," said Mitchell. And curiously, he didn't need to force the emotion much, because part of him really was panicking, not for his mother, but for what would happen if they discovered the truth. Dr. Lowell was clearly trying to process the information, trying to understand how this was possible. "Mitchell, you need to call the police immediately. Report her missing, give her description, tell them what condition she was in. And then you come back to the hospital. We need to talk about this in person," instructed the doctor, his voice carrying a mixture of concern and something else, perhaps suspicion, perhaps just confusion. Mitchell quickly agreed. Yes, I'll call right now. I'll do everything I can to find her." "My God, what have I done? I should have waited for the ambulance like you said. This is all my fault," lamented Mitchell, adding guilt to the mixture of emotions, because guilt was what an innocent son would feel. He hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, looking at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. "There's no going back now," the lie has been told. "I just need to maintain it," he thought, hardening his heart against any remaining remorse. Mitchell actually did call the police, reporting a missing person, giving his mother's description, inventing details about where he supposedly lost her. The officers took the information, said they would begin a search, asked him to remain available for more questions. He agreed to everything, maintaining the facade perfectly. Afterward, he drove home, to the mansion that would soon be taken by the banks, but not for long if everything went according to plan. Arriving there, he went in and simply sat on the floor of the empty living room, his back against the wall, staring at nothing. He tried to feel something, guilt, remorse, horror for what he had done. But all he could feel was a strange emptiness, as if he had left part of his humanity on that deserted road along with his mother. "She's dead now or will be soon. There's no way to survive out there alone, as sick as she is," he thought, with a coldness that frightened him, but not enough to change anything. The next 3 days were surreal. Mitchell kept up appearances, answered police questions, went back to the hospital to talk with Dr. Lowell, who looked at him with an expression suggesting he knew something was wrong, but couldn't prove anything. He participated in organized searches, called his mother's name in areas where he knew she wasn't, did everything a concerned son would do. And gradually, as the searches produced no results, as no body was found, he began to relax, began to believe he would actually get away with it. He was already consulting lawyers about the inheritance process, about how long it would take to declare his mother legally dead in the absence of a body. He was already planning how he would use that money, how he would rebuild his life, how he would start over. "Everything will be fine. I'll have a second chance. I'll do things differently this time," he thought, convincing himself that the end justified the terrible means. On the morning of the 3rd day, Mitchell woke up in his empty mansion. He had slept better than in weeks, a deep and dreamless sleep, as if his brain had shut off the part that judged him morally. He got up, stretched, feeling strangely light. The guilt he expected to feel didn't come, or perhaps he had become so skilled at blocking it that he no longer noticed. He walked to the kitchen, thinking about making coffee, planning his day, taking a few more steps toward claiming his inheritance. He passed through the living room and approached the large window facing the street, thinking of opening it to let the sun in. He pulled the curtains in a casual movement and then froze completely, his blood turning to ice, his heart skipping an entire beat. Out there, parked in a perfect line in front of his house, were 3 black cars. Large, intimidating, with dark windows that didn't allow him to see who was inside, and nobody was getting out. They just waited. Mitchell stood paralyzed in front of the window, his eyes fixed on the 3 black cars parked in front of his house. The heart that moments before beat calmly now raced at a frantic rhythm that made his temples throb. His hands began to shake uncontrollably while his mind tried to process what this meant. Official cars. That was obvious from the intimidating appearance and the way they were positioned, blocking any possible exit. But who was inside them? Police? Investigators? And why? The possibility crossed his mind that it might be about his debts, perhaps court officers coming to take possession of the house, but something deep in his stomach told him it was worse, much worse than that. "They can't know, it's impossible. There's no way they could have discovered," he muttered to himself, trying to calm down, trying to find some logic other than the obvious truth that his subconscious already knew. He continued watching through the window, unable to move, like an animal caught in the headlights of a speeding car. Minutes passed, or perhaps they were seconds that seemed like minutes. Time had lost meaning again. The cars remained motionless, silent, threatening in their stillness. No one came out, no one honked, no one knocked on the door. They just waited, and this waiting was more terrifying than any action could be. Mitchell felt panic beginning to rise in his throat like bile. All the rationalizations he had made over the last 3 days, all the justifications, all the lies he had told himself, began to crumble. If those cars were there for him, if somehow they had discovered what he had done, his life was over. There would be no inheritance, no fresh start, no second chance. There would only be consequences. "I need to go down. I need to face this. Running will only make things worse," he thought. But his legs wouldn't obey his brain's command. Finally, he forced himself to move. He stepped away from the window with stumbling steps, crossed the empty room, descended the stairs holding onto the railing because he didn't trust his own legs to support him. Each step was a deeper descent into the hell he had created for himself. He reached the front door and stood there, hand on the doorknob, gathering courage to open it. He could hear his own heart beating, could feel the cold sweat running down his back, could feel the primitive fear of someone about to face the consequences of their actions. He took 3 deep breaths, trying to calm himself, trying to prepare any mental defense he might have. Then, with a movement that seemed to happen in slow motion, he turned the knob and opened the door. The morning sunlight blinded him momentarily, and when his eyes adjusted, he saw the doors of the 3 cars opening simultaneously. "Here we go, whatever it is, let's get this over with," he said quietly to himself, trying to sound brave but failing miserably. 6 people got out of the cars, 2 investigators, a prosecutor, and 3 police officers. The older investigator asked if Mitchell was Eleanor's son. With a trembling voice, Mitchell confirmed and asked if they had found his mother. The investigator revealed that she was found alive by a farmer 2 days ago on a rural road. The second investigator informed that Eleanor was hospitalized, conscious, and had reported everything. Mitchell tried to maintain the charade, but the investigator said they had her statement and security camera footage. The prosecutor formally charged him for his crimes against his mother. They found Eleanor's financial documents in Mitchell's car, proving he knew about the fortune before abandoning her. Mitchell, desperate, involuntarily admitted guilt by saying he had no choice. He was arrested and handcuffed. The prosecutor revealed that Eleanor asked to see him one last time before formalizing the charges. Mitchell was taken to the hospital under escort. During the silent journey, he reflected on how greed had transformed him into that monster. Upon arrival, he was escorted through the corridors to the private room, where he would have only 5 minutes with his mother. The room was small but comfortable, with a large window where sunlight came in. And there, in the hospital bed, was Eleanor. Mitchell almost didn't recognize her. She was even more debilitated than the last time he had seen her. There were tubes coming out of her arms, monitors by her side, but her eyes were open, alert. And when she saw him enter, something in those eyes changed. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't anger, it was something much more devastating. It was deep sadness, absolute disappointment. It was the look of someone whose soul had been broken by the person who should have protected her. Mitchell felt his legs give way, and unable to stand, fell to his knees beside the bed, the handcuffs hitting the floor with a metallic sound. "Mother," was all he managed to say before tears began to fall uncontrollably. Eleanor looked at her son kneeling beside her bed, handcuffed, destroyed, and said nothing for a long moment. She just observed, her eyes scanning his face as if she were seeing a stranger. Mitchell couldn't stop crying, sobs shaking his entire body. "Mom, I'm so sorry, I didn't know what I was doing, I was lost, desperate, I wasn't thinking clearly," he began to say, the words coming out in a jumbled and incoherent flow. Eleanor raised a weak hand, a gesture asking for silence, and Mitchell immediately obeyed. When she finally spoke, her voice was weak but firm, carrying a strength that Mitchell didn't know she still possessed. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Mitchell. You always knew. "Don't insult me by trying to pretend it was an accident or a moment of confusion," she said, and each word was like a knife in his heart. Mitchell shook his head vigorously, still kneeling, the handcuffs making it impossible to reach out and hold her hand as he desperately wanted to do. "No, Mom, I was beside myself, the debts, the pressure. I wasn't thinking clearly, I never really wanted to hurt you," he insisted, but even to his own ears it sounded like the pathetic excuses they were. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, a single tear running down her temple until it disappeared into the pillow. "You left me on a deserted road, Mitchell. Left me alone, sick, begging for you to come back. I saw you leave, saw you abandon me. There was no confusion in that moment, there was choice. You chose to take my life to get my money," she said, opening her eyes again and looking directly at him with an intensity that made him recoil. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of the monitors and Mitchell's irregular breathing. He wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but there was no defense. She was right. It had been a choice, conscious and calculated. "Why, son?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice breaking on the last word. "What did I do wrong? Where did I fail in raising you? How did you become capable of doing something like this to your own mother?" She continued, and there was no accusation in those questions, only genuine pain, a real need to understand. Mitchell had no answer. He searched his mind, his heart, his soul for some explanation that made sense, that justified the unjustifiable. But there was nothing beyond greed, selfishness, moral weakness. "I don't know, Mum. I have no excuse. I have no justification. I lost myself," he said, and it was the most honest truth he had ever spoken. Eleanor looked at him for another long moment, her eyes searching for some remnant of the boy she had raised, the son she had loved, the person she thought he was. But she found none. All she saw was a stranger, someone who shared her DNA but not her humanity. "Go away, Mitchell," she finally said, her voice tired but determined. "I no longer have a son. The boy I raised died somewhere along the way, and I don't know the man kneeling here in front of me," she continued, each word a final sentence, a definitive cut. Mitchell felt as if he had been shot. "No, Mom, please don't say that. I can change. I can be better. Give me a chance," he begged, extending his handcuffed hands in desperate supplication. But Eleanor had already closed her eyes, turning her face away from him. "Go away," she repeated, lower this time but no less final. The police officers who had remained silent near the door then approached, each taking one of Mitchell's arms. "Time to go, sir," one of them said, helping him up from the floor. Mitchell resisted, trying to stay for one more moment, trying to make his mother look at him again. "Mom, please, don't end it like this, please," he shouted as he was dragged to the door. Eleanor didn't turn, didn't open her eyes, didn't respond. She just remained motionless in bed, a statue of sadness and disillusionment. Mitchell was pulled out of the room, still shouting, still begging. The door began to close behind him, cutting off his view of his mother. And then, just when the door was almost completely closed, he heard it. The sharp and continuous sound of a monitor going off, the emergency alarm that Mitchell already knew all too well. "No, Mum!" he shouted, trying to go back, but the police officers held him firmly. Through the small window in the door, Mitchell saw nurses and doctors rushing into the room. He saw frantic movement, saw Dr. Lowell appear from somewhere and rush in. He saw the curtain being pulled, blocking his view of what was happening inside. "She's having another arrest. We need to move away. You can't stay here," one of the police officers said, pulling Mitchell farther away. He didn't want to go, couldn't leave his mother like this. "She's going to die and I won't be there. She's going to die thinking I'm a monster. She's going to die without forgiving me," he thought, despair taking complete hold. "I screamed her name once, twice, 3 times, but the door remained closed. The doctors didn't answer. The monitor continued its terrible sound. Finally, having no more strength to resist, he allowed them to take him away, each step distancing him from his mother, each meter increasing the distance between them that he now knew would never be crossed again. He was taken back to the car, placed in the back seat again, the procession moving this time not to the mansion but to the police station. Mitchell was in a state of shock, his mind trapped in that hospital room, in that sound of the monitor, in the possibility that those had been his mother's last moments and she spent them rejecting him, denying him, saying he was no longer her son. She can't die like this, she can't. I need one more chance to explain, to truly ask for forgiveness, he thought frantically. But he knew it was too late, that he had wasted all the chances he had. At the police station he was processed, photographed, booked, each step dehumanizing him a little more, transforming him from a person into a number, from Mitchell into just another criminal in the system. He was placed in a temporary detention cell to await a custody hearing. The cell was small, cold, with only a metal bed and a bathroom without a door. Other detainees were in nearby cells, some shouting, others silent. Mitchell sat on the bed and simply stared at the wall, empty, destroyed beyond the capacity to feel. The following days were a blur of legal procedures. Custody hearing where the judge, after hearing the accusations and evidence, denied bail citing flight risk and the gravity of the crime. Transfer to provisional prison where he would await trial. Brief and formal conversations with an assigned public defender, who looked at him with the same judgment as everyone else. Mitchell responded to everything mechanically, without real interest or participation. His mind was trapped in two places, in that hospital room hearing the monitor go off, and on that deserted road where he abandoned his mother. These two moments repeated in an infinite loop in his head, torturing him without cease. He couldn't eat, could barely sleep, and when he did sleep, the nightmares came. He dreamed of his mother calling for him, begging, crying, dying alone because he had left her. I deserve this, I deserve all this and more, he thought during the endless nights, lying on the hard cell bed while other prisoners snored around him. 3 weeks after his arrest, a guard came to his cell. "I have a lawyer visit," the guard announced, opening the door. Mitchell got up confused. There was no visit scheduled that he knew of. He was taken to a small visitation room with a table and 2 chairs. Sitting in one of them was a man in a suit that Mitchell didn't recognize, older, with a leather folder on the table. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Dr. Briggs. I'm a private attorney. I was hired to deliver this to you," said the attorney, placing a white envelope on the table. Mitchell looked at the envelope without understanding. "Who hired you?" "I don't have money for a private attorney," Mitchell said, confused. The attorney smiled sadly. "I wasn't hired by you. I was hired by your mother, Eleanor, to deliver this letter to you personally," he explained, and Mitchell felt as if he had received an electric shock. Mitchell took the envelope with hands violently shaking. "Is she alive? Is my mother alive?" he asked, hardly daring to believe, remembering that monitor going off, that terrible moment when he thought she was dying. The attorney nodded. "Yes, she is alive. She had another cardiac arrest that day you visited her, but the doctors managed to revive her again. After that, the hospital finally managed to transfer her to that specialist they had found. The treatment was successful, Mr. Mitchell. She's in remission, recovering slowly but with a positive prognosis," Dr. Briggs explained, and Mitchell didn't know whether to laugh or cry at that information. She was alive. She had survived not only the abandonment, but the cancer itself. "But she doesn't want to see you. That's why she hired me to deliver the letter. She was very clear that she doesn't want direct contact," the attorney continued. And those words hurt more than anything else. Mitchell opened the envelope with clumsy fingers, removing several sheets of paper with his mother's familiar handwriting. He began to read, and with each word he felt his world crumble even more. "Son, I survived," the letter began, and Mitchell had to stop, wipe away the tears that were already falling before continuing. "I survived not by luck or chance, but because someone, a farmer whose name is Earl, still believed my life was worth it. He found me, took me to the hospital, stayed with me until he was sure I was in good hands. A complete stranger did for me what my own son refused to do," the letter continued. Mitchell sobbed, the sound escaping from his throat against his will. "The treatment with the specialist worked. I'm in remission, something that doctors call miraculous considering the advanced state of the cancer. I'm going to live, Mitchell. I'm going to live to see more dawns, more springs, more moments that you tried to steal from me," he read. The letter continued, each paragraph an additional blow. "As for the fortune you discovered, the one for which you were willing to kill me, I want you to know that you won't see a penny of it. I donated everything. Half to Earl, the farmer who saved me so he can have a better life, a life he deserves. the other half to charities that care for cancer patients who don't have resources for treatment. I wanted the money to save lives since you tried to use it to take one, Eleanor had written. Mitchell closed his eyes tightly, the pain of those words being physical. All that money, all that fortune for which he had committed the unforgivable, was gone, distributed out of reach. But more than the money, Mitchell, you lost something that no amount of wealth could buy. You lost my love, my respect, my trust. You lost the only person in this world who loved you unconditionally, who would have given her own life for you without hesitation. You had that and threw it away, the letter continued. The last lines were the most devastating. Enjoy the next years in prison, son. Use this time to think about the man you've become, about the choices you made, about the price you're paying. You can use this time to become the man I always dreamed you would be, the good, honest, compassionate man I raised you to be. Or you can use this time to sink even deeper into darkness, to become even more the monster you chose to be. The choice is yours, it always has been. I will not be there to see which path you choose. This is the last communication we will have. Don't try to contact me. Don't try to write to me. Don't try to visit me if you ever get out. For me, the son I had died on that deserted road. Goodbye, Mitchell. May you find peace if you are capable. The letter ended, signed simply with Eleanor, not with mother, not with any affectionate term, just her name. Mitchell let the letter fall on the table, unable to hold it, unable to continue looking at those words. The lawyer remained seated in silence, allowing Mitchell to process, allowing the reality of everything he had lost to hit him completely. Finally, after several minutes of silence broken only by Mitchell's sobs, the lawyer stood up. She asked me to say one last thing personally. She wants you to know that she forgives you, Mitchell. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because she needs to forgive in order to move forward with her own life. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, doesn't mean forgetting, doesn't mean there will be a second chance, said Dr. Briggs, briefly placing a hand on Mitchell's shoulder. Take care of yourself, young man. And if you're smart, use the time ahead to become someone better, the lawyer advised, and then left, taking with him Mitchell's last connection to the life he had known. Mitchell was taken back to his cell. He lay on the hard bed, staring at the stained and cracked ceiling, his mother's letter still echoing in his mind. She was alive, she was cured, she was free. And he was trapped, not just physically within the walls of that cell, but emotionally, spiritually trapped in the hell he had created for himself. He thought about the fortune he had discovered, those millions that seemed to be the solution to all his problems. Now they were gone, and he realized with cruel clarity that even if he had succeeded, even if his mother had died and he had inherited everything, it would never have been worth it. No amount of money could compensate for what he had lost. Not the material fortune, but the unconditional love, the only person who had always been by his side, the only person who loved him without reservations. I exchanged everything for nothing, destroyed what I had most valuable for an illusion, he thought, and finally, completely, understood the magnitude of his loss. The years would stretch ahead of him, years of prison, years of loneliness, years carrying the weight of what he had done. The sentence that would come from the judge would be long, of this he was certain, but it would not be perpetual. Eventually he would get out, return to the world, rebuild some kind of life. But there would be a sentence that no judge could decree, no lawyer could reduce, no good behavior could shorten. The sentence of living knowing what he had done, of forever carrying the memory of his mother's face when he abandoned her, of never being able to undo, never being able to fix, never being able to recover what he had thrown away. That was the true life sentence. She forgave me, but I will never forgive myself, and perhaps that's how it should be. Perhaps that's true justice, Mitchell thought, closing his eyes as the darkness of the cell and the darkness of his soul merged into one. And in that darkness, finally, completely, totally, Mitchell understood the true cost of greed. Now tell me in the comments where you're from, and tell me, did you like this story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and check out the next one that's waiting for you here on screen. See you there.